Christian, welcome to the First 365 podcast, my brother. Good to have you here, bro. Thank you so much for coming down.
Cheers.
For those that don't know you, why should they take what you say seriously? It's a question I ask most guests.
That's a great question. I think I've got a lot to tell people in terms of a lot to educate people around the topic of HIV. And I think I've got quite a lot of experience, probably more so on the adverse side around becoming an entrepreneur and going through those motions to become, I suppose, successful in a sense.
Okay. What do you mean by successful?
I don't mean money. I think that's a really key thing. I think money is a byproduct of the success of whatever the problem is that you're trying to solve. I think that's kind of...
So it's not money, so what is it? It's a byproduct.
So for me, I suppose, my version of success is building a platform that enables people to connect, enables people to find support, education, and then if we do that right, if we get that right and people enjoy it and people are engaged, then the money kind of follows after that. So success for me is really, I'm in the business of connection, the business of love in a sense.
Okay, yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
Let's get straight into that. So Positive Plus One, what is it? Who's it for? Mm-hmm. And why is it important that the world has it?
Okay. So Positive Plus One is a dating app turned social platform for the HIV community. And that means both people living with and affected by HIV. In terms of what does it do? It's like I've sort of just mentioned, it's a platform designed to help people connect, to find support, guidance, and a way that sort of bridges the gap between post-diagnosis, you were handed a pamphlet on the medication, and then there are a lot of good, reputable sort of charities that you can go to and go visit, but they're face-to-face interactions, and that's quite a daunting thing for someone who's just been diagnosed, who hasn't come to terms with their HIV status yet. And we're aiming to sort of bridge that gap. You can find a directory of people, organisations, places, people to speak with in a platform as a intermediary step, and that's kind of what we're trying to solve that bridge that gap.
Right. With something so big as in like a social issue, my question that I've asked you before, which I think was quite interesting to share the answer, with a platform which is centred around people with HIV. Yeah. Is this a charity or is this a for-profit organisation?
Yeah, okay. So, truth be told, I originally started out as a non-profit organisation, then realising how much it costs to build an app, raising capital, trying to get government funding, like it's nearly impossible, because people don't maybe understand. So, the business model is we are a for-profit company, but we give 10% of proceeds, not just profits, back to charities and organisations that support this community. So that way, we're creating a feedback loop, a bit like a community interest company, but it helps me raise money as well. Helps me raise to be able to build.
So with investors, you think it's important that it has to be for profit. So to actually build this thing and get people to invest in it, it has to be something that they can see a return on financially.
Yeah, I think so. And I proved myself right because, I sort of took my early ideas to market around, trying to raise money for a not-for-profit, and I didn't get any bites, any nibbles whatsoever. Okay. As then I sort of start to, build out a commercial model for profit, but with the charity donation built into it, then people sort of understood, but yet you're still getting a return on your investment. And it's enabled me to make some great partnerships. But I had the best intentions of a not-for-profit, but it just didn't work out. It's just not right. It just didn't work out.
The best intentions, but now we need to get some cash in the bank to actually build this thing. We need to get some cash to
build it. That's truth.
So talk to me. What is the step-by-step, and how much have you raised so far from investors for the HIV platform?
Okay, so in total, I've raised just over $750,000,
which is
760k thereabouts.
Pounds.
British pounds. what was the first bit of the question? I can't remember.
What's the step-by-step to actually raising
Okay,
£760,000?
God, I think if there was honestly a step-by-step model, that a one-size-fits-all for raising money, it'd be the easiest thing in the world. But it's not. It's an ever-changing landscape. Right now we've got so much volatility in the economy. Raising money's harder than ever. Interest rates are at an all-time high. So that's pretty difficult. But in terms of the steps that I took for raising capital, were I spoke to my friends and family first. My sort of close network. Then I went and did my financial modelling with my accountant. And after we'd done that, he was like, "Can I invest?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's great. Yeah, of course you can." And then as I sort of...
Invest all the fees that you just paid him.
yeah. Actually, no, to be fair, he does me a solid. He actually acts as my acting CFO. He helps a lot. So he's worth his weight in gold, that man. But yeah, so he was like, "Look, this looks great from a financial standpoint. Again, helps not being a not-for-profit."
Yeah.
But we did the financial modelling. He said, "Can I invest?" That gave me a little bit of the boost that I needed. And then I took it to other friends, sort of started to speak to their friends of friends. And in my first round, I raised 60k, which was just enough to get me to be able to launch a white label platform, test, validate, and make sure people really wanted a platform of this kind. Again, I started a dating platform in the beginning, so we were testing different price points. We were using the dating model, and it worked. And then I was like, right, now we've got a little bit of traction. We've focus groups. We understand what other needs that they need, the problems that they need to be solved. And then I went back out to market. I raised some more money, and I've just raised another 390k recently. So things are going pretty good.
So the majority has been from friends and family.
Friends, family, and then as that network effect starts to happen, you kind of, so and so might be interested in investing, and you go and have a conversation with them. And I really think proximity is power. I really do. I think I try and get to as many networking events as I can. Even if you get one introduction off the back of that introduction might be worth 100 grand, maybe £1 million. Do you know what I mean?
One thing that I, from obviously raising money in the past, have recognised as well is the responsibility of raising investment, especially when it's above the 100k, multiple 100k mark, like we've done, like you've done.
Yeah.
How do you manage that weight of responsibility? Because ultimately, it could be a super... Obviously, any investment carries some risk, right? So how do you feel emotionally managing the responsibility of having 760k's worth of investment given to you to make something work with the possibility that it might not work? How do you manage that emotionally? Or do you not even consider it?
No, I think from time to time it can be a bit daunting, especially if things aren't going exactly as planned, and that will happen. I suppose I'm not stuck in my ways around like the plan. Like the aim is to get from point A to point B, and point B is building a platform that helps people, connect, support, educate, that kind of thing. So that's the aim. And whether the plan sort of is a bit more zigzagged, I'm fluid enough and agile and able to sort of pivot enough now. And I think I managed my investors' expectations with that in the beginning. I was like, look, like it's not just a straightforward, thing. And I've been super honest with them, and I keep them up to date as much as I possibly can. And I think that helps. That having that level of honesty really helps sort of take the pressure off. Because all I can be is honest, and if things aren't quite going to plan, then at least they know that I've got enough vision to be like, right, well that didn't quite work, but we're still on the right trajectory in a sense. We're just going for a different approach.
Okay.
And then, I don't know. I suppose, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, and some people listening and watching this might think this sounds ridiculous, but 760 grand isn't that much money. It's a lot of money if I had to repay it all back myself. But I don't know, in terms of like the financial model and stuff and what the outcomes could be, that 760 grand is not. It's not a massive amount of money. Don't get me wrong.
In context.
Yeah, in context, yeah.
So in context, if you do acquire the amount of users who want to benefit from the HIV app, what could those revenues be on an annual basis if you hit your targets on that forecast?
Yeah, so I think by the end of this year, we anticipate to be doing just over £200,000 in revenue per month. We've got so there's the subscription model side of things, which is just for the dating aspect. But as we've become more social, we've now got ad revenue partners really interested in advertising on the platform, predominantly the pharmaceutical industry, which have got deep pockets.
Right.
So
how does that work? Pharmaceutical companies want to advertise
Yeah.
to people with HIV to choose their medication.
Yeah, so they've kind of got three main topics of the pharmaceutical companies that they want to address. One is a lot of people don't realise that you can switch medication if you want. So educating them on that. Then if they've got a new product coming to market, they might want to be doing clinical trials, or they might want to be doing some sort of studies, or they might want to
Research.
Yeah, research is one aspect, and then the other side of it is making people aware, like this is a new.
How do you qualify that as the person who's obviously a decision maker in a HIV business? How do you qualify which pharmaceutical companies are validated enough to advertise on your platform without compromising your integrity?
Honestly, I do a lot of.
I feel like Piers Morgan,
No,
right?
it's good. Yeah, no, it's good. I think it's a great question. I go and speak to my community. I gain an understanding of what their opinion is of the likes of Gilead or Pfizer and these guys. And some of these drug companies now are really adopting a different approach to HIV, as opposed to, they know they've got a captivated market. They know that they've got an audience that need their drugs, and there's a lot of people don't agree with some of the methods that they approached back in the 80s and 90s. And I speak to my community, I speak to people of influence, and I'm like, what do you think? Are they right? Tell me about your past experiences with them. And that helps me make my decision. And then I'll also take on board, what are these companies, what are they trying to achieve? Are they trying to address what they got wrong? Are they open to saying, we're sorry, like we made a mistake? And what approach are they trying to take now? What are they trying to put the right foot forward? I think there's a number of things that I need to take into account in order to make sure that I've got the right fit, because I don't want it to dilute what we're achieving. Do you know what I mean? What we're trying to build.
All these questions are just coming up in my mind, and I've got to challenge you, because otherwise I wouldn't be doing a justice to my own curiosity.
Yeah, sure.
You're somebody who doesn't have HIV, right?
Correct.
So why does that make you the right person to lead a HIV community with this platform?
And that question alone was probably the most asked question I got in the very early days of launching Positive Plus One, because I was approaching HIV charities, other organisations, and being like, I've got this idea, this is the kind of the problem that I've seen, I'm trying to solve it with a platform.
Yeah.
Are you interested in working with me? And there was almost a sense that, if I wasn't a person living with HIV, that I was just there to try and cash in off the community. And it's taken me time, to overcome this, and I've proved that I'm not just here for the money. But to answer your question as to why I'm the right person, the most stigmatising, uneducated people that give this community a bad rap are, and in my opinion, the white heterosexual community. And I am a white heterosexual man, and I think that it needs to come from me. Like I need to be the person that's saying, you need to listen and re-educate yourself, because these old myths, these old terms, like they're wrong. HIV has changed. It's no longer a death sentence, and I feel like a lot people tend to only listen to people that they feel aligned with, and you might not align with the minority community or the gay community or a different cultural community, So if I align with the mass population, they're maybe going to listen to me a little bit more.
Mass population in the Western world.
Yeah.
Gotta be politically correct on that.
And that's kind of why I feel that, I don't know, it didn't really dawn on me in the beginning. I was just trying to help one friend, but it was literally like, as I realised, I was like, this has to be me, it has to be someone of sort of my background that has to tell these people. I tell all my friends all the time, like I educate them, like, people think you can't share toothbrushes, stuff like that, or you can't kiss.
Why would you?
I don't know, your partner.
Oh, if you're
maybe.
in a partner, right,
partnership,
right.
not like
with your mates. Can borrow your toothbrush, mate.
Kissing, shaking hands, like all this kind of stuff. Like it's ridiculous.
So, what are these myths around HIV right now? If you're going to give me the top 3 myths that aren't true from your research, what are they?
I think number one is that, and this is, that everyone's within the community shouting from the rooftops about this. If you reach an undetectable viral load by taking your medication every single day, you can no longer pass on HIV. And the term is U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable. That is huge. It's massive. The fact that you can have unprotected sex with someone living with HIV and not contract HIV, they can't pass it on. That's massive.
So you can have unprotected sex and not transmit HIV with modern day medication, which is a big positive.
Big positive. People, no longer die. HIV is no longer a death sentence.
Right.
People can take the medication and live a long, full, healthy life. It suppresses the virus in their system so much so that they could go for a HIV test and it comes up negative.
Wow.
The medical advancements there are incredible. They're amazing. And a third one.
Testing your research now.
Yeah, you
don't
are.
have to answer it.
Yeah. I suppose, that the whole idea that HIV is dirty, that's just not true. People have sex. People get STIs of all kinds. Like, you're not at fault for doing that. Do you know what I mean? And I just think the theory that a person living with HIV is dirty because they had sex and they acquired HIV.
Yeah.
The fuck you on about?
There's this whole idea, isn't there? You mentioned the gay community a few times since we've started. You're a straight male, or are you gay?
I'm straight.
Okay. Again, does this just HIV? Another myth that I feel is out there is HIV just affects gay people, but you told me some statistics, which I was wondering if you could share.
These 2 facts will blow people's minds. I feel a lot of people's minds. 53% of the worldwide HIV community, which is 40 million people, 54% of people living with HIV are women, which is, again, bust the myth that it just affects the gay community. In the last decade, more heterosexual people have been diagnosed with HIV than there have, gay or queer or the LGBTQ community. HIV doesn't discriminate. Doesn't care who you are, doesn't care what your background is or whether you think that you're not susceptible to it. Like, HIV affects everybody.
How many people out there have HIV?
According to UNAIDS' most recent fact sheet, HIV prevalence is at around between 38 to 42 million people worldwide.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's a lot of people.
It's crazy. With the HIV platform, that's obviously something that you're in the first 365 with right now, but you've had business success and business failure in the past, haven't you? One thing that stood out was when you told me about how you watched one of your businesses burn to the ground. Can you walk me through what the hell you were talking about?
Yeah.
I thought you were just speaking in a metaphor or an analogy.
No, I physically watched my barbershop and tattoo studio burn to the ground.
For insurance?
Yeah. Do you know what's
For
funny?
An insurance claim?
Do you know what's funny? My dad rang me that morning when I'd said to him...
Asked you for some money?
And he went, did you do it? And I'm like, what the fuck? He did. So I owned a barbershop and a tattoo studio in the centre of Harrogate.
Makes sense with the hands and the hair.
Yeah, the hands and the hair, and, you know, I built it up and we were doing really well. And then there was a new deli that was opening next door. We were super excited, the guys who were working in there. It was like, brilliant, there's a sandwich shop next door. We could just go to it, it's super simple. And they just finished building the place. It was the Thursday night, they put the sign up outside, they were going to open the next day. Friday morning, I got a phone call from one of my clients, and he was like, I don't have to tell you this. He went, but I think your shop's on fire. And I'm like, what are you on about? And at the time, I only lived 500 yards away from where my shop was. So I jumped out of bed, and I could smell smoke, and I thought, no, it's just in my head. I got out, put some trackies on, ran outside, and there's black soot in the air. And I'm thinking, no way, well, like, this is not happening. And I ran down, and you have to go under a train track and come out the archway there, and I could see the shop, and there were just flames just busting out. And I was like, nah, this is still not happening. And it kind of looked like it were next door. And in order to get into the main entrance of the shop, you have to sort of cross over the street, and it's up like a little pedestrian street. And I've got to the bottom of it, and I literally could see the flames spitting out of like the shop window. And I feel like, as a man, as a human being, there's not a lot of occasions where you can't do anything in a situation. So like, if there's a fight kicking off, you could maybe sort of like intervene, calm people down, and make a positive impact on that, right? With a fire, like, you're endangering your life, or even other people if you try and pull them in to help or whatever. Like, you just have to just stand and watch it happen. And the deli next door had an oven fire. The electrician had not quite set it up right, and they were meant to open that day. And I just stood there and basically for 10, 12 hours watched it burn to the ground. And I lost 10, 11 times my income overnight. I had like 10, 11 members of staff. Like, so it was just...
How do you manage that emotionally when you're kind of trying to bounce back from watching your entire career, life savings, business, income, responsibility as staff? How do you bounce back emotionally when that's burning to the ground?
I had an investment for that business as well. I'd raised like 25k, and you know, I've got the responsibility of paying them guys back. I had the responsibility of all my staff. Like, I provided them with a place to work, and suddenly these 10 people didn't have a place to go to work anymore. Neither did I. So that the actual first instance, somebody came up to me on the street, one of the business owners, and was like, "Christian, are you okay?" And I just started laughing, and I was just like, honestly, I just started, and he were like, "Are you in shock?" And I just stood there and I just watched them. I was like, I was like, "What the fuck do you do? Like, what do you do?" And then I was like, "Yeah." I don't know how I felt. It was like a bit of a shock, almost numb emotion. I went and sat in a coffee shop and kind of watched it burn down.
You went and sat in another deli.
Yeah, I literally did with my staff, and we sat down, and we were all just sort of looking at each other and like.
Reminds me of The Apprentice when they get the losers go and sit in that cafe.
Honestly, that's probably the best
setting I've got in my mind.
And because they were arriving to go to work, arriving to the scene of. Yeah. You know, this
chaos.
Yeah, chaos. And they were ringing me, and I was like, I'm at the coffee shops down the street. And they came and sat in with me, and it was just almost silence. Just sit there in silence. So the next morning, it kind of hit me, because I was used to getting up, you know, getting to work, and I had nothing to do. And I was like, and then, you know, the guys were losing out on income, because that was there, you know, and they've got families, and then it all hit me at once, and then I kind of jumped back to action. I was like, right, I'm going to find us all a place to work where we can rent a space in maybe another salon, and I did that within the space of a week. So we were back working, but then none of us had any tools. All the stuff was in, you know, it was in the shop in the fire. So I was running around to all my friends who were under the barber shops. I was like, "Have you got any spare scissors, like clippers? We've got clients who still need to have their hair cut." Or yeah, it was just a wild time. And then it took took the insurance company about 9 months to pay us, to pay me out. And obviously I had everything in that shop at the time, everything in that business. And I nearly went bankrupt. It was a Christmas, coming up to Christmas. I got paid on the 1st of January, but it was still sort of up in the air when it was coming. Like, I'd just paid my rent with the money that I'd made from cutting hair in this other shop. But, you know, you live within your means. As you earn a bit more, you sort of spend a bit more. And I was like, I didn't have any spare money for presents. I didn't have any spare money and I was like, you know, it's Christmas. What am I going to do? I couldn't afford to live. And, you know, fortunately, it dropped in 1st of January, and it was just like the biggest weight, the sense of relief. But in that period of time, I'd lost all my guys because they weren't earning the same amount of money that they were in the shop, because we had a great location. They'd sort of gone, and it was, I don't know, it was bizarre. It felt really isolated. I'd lost I suppose you lose, in a sense, you lose a bit of family, you lose a bit of culture. Do you know what I mean? That were tough. But then, yeah, you pick yourself up out the rubble, or the ashes, quite literally, and yeah, you just go again. And I think, to be honest, having experienced that as an entrepreneur, that I don't think many people have been through, I feel like that's made me more resilient. It's actually something I actively say to investors. I'm like, I've lived and breathed through probably the worst moment in a business time, and I'm still here. You know, I've since set up another salon, and I've recently just given that to the other guys, the other business owners who were in the joint venture with me. I'm like, it's yours, take it. Positive Plus One's doing really well for me. It's now my full-time job. I love what I do. I've got a newborn baby. I want to spend more time with him.
That's Riley, right?
You're Riley, yeah. Life of Riley.
How are you finding parenting and entrepreneurship as...
Hard.
Yeah, it's tough.
Hard. I think the balance, finding that balance. And I'm actually, the first thing that I missed was my time with my partner, in our relationship. It's kind of like, come down a couple of pegs now, you know. And then that work balance, you know, I'm away now here recording with you. I spent last night away from my family, and I'm so pleased to be here, but at the same time, I kind of just want to be there. Do you know what I mean? So it's finding that balance, and not wanting to feel like I put everything on my partner's shoulders to look after his baby. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I'm sure you know that as well. Like,
yeah, I feel like, you know, people have no idea. I certainly didn't, when trying to balance parenting and running a business. And when I first had my firstborn son, Neo, I tried to do both. So I'd still be coming to the office. I took some time off, but then I was straight back full-time CEO, trying to manage a team, manage clients, do all of that stuff. And what I found when it came to my second child, my daughter, I realized that I just have to surrender. And I have to say, I can't do things the same way I used to. As a parent now, trying to run a business, I have to find a new way of doing things. Yeah. And one of those things for me is working from home a lot more. You know, equally, you're here today. This is the fourth time I've been here in the last month, you know what I mean? But luckily I've got a team and automation and things that can make that happen. But you're in a startup, right? You're in a different period of growth. This is for most businesses, this time that you're in right now is the most accelerated growth that you need to see in your business to ensure its survival. And then matching that with a new life, how do you figure that out mentally for yourself?
Honestly, therapy helps. Yeah, I'm a massive advocate for it. I think whether you think you do or whether you think you don't need therapy, like, it doesn't just have to be from I've got a problem and I need to fix it. It can also be, you know, how can I perform optimally? How can I be my best self? And you know, and I think life is about sort of riding the waves a lot of the time and understanding that it's ever changing. Like, it's always, you know, there's always going to be new things coming in, and you know, and I find that the therapy side of it really helps me. Just helps me to understand and even challenge my own thoughts on it. Yeah. And then I suppose, you know, working with my team and working with my partner and trying to manage those expectations. You know, things have changed for me in my time, in my life at the minute, and I can't be as omnipresent as I used to be. You know, I need to, you know, I want to be there as much as I can for my son, which means that I am going to be sat with a baby on my lap whilst I'm doing a Zoom call. I am going to be, you know, not able to maybe get to as much stuff. So I kind of need you guys to do a bit more for me. That kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? So, but again, comes back to just kind of just being honest with yourself, being honest with your team, your partners, whatever it might be.
Yeah. In any relationship, balance, time, commitment is obviously important. With your relationship, do you think that's fair that you get to be the entrepreneur and they're kind of forced into this corner to be the primary caregiver for your son?
Honestly, no, I don't. No, I don't. And it's my partner, Shona. She's really driven as well. She works in property. She's got her own aspirations and stuff, and I know that there's something that she's struggling with now, anyway, because she kind of wants to get back to work, but she doesn't want to. You know, we both don't want to miss out on this short phase, sort of 0 to 4 years old, when everything's so special and changing so quickly. And you know, and Shona's a better parent than me. Like, that's me being, and like, that's the truth. Like, she's just the mother's instincts. Like, I think it's real. Like, I truly think it's real. And you can see it. There's times when I can't settle him, and she just puts him in his arms, and he's just like, and I think that's amazing. And that's that, again, that ever trying to find that balance, that point. What's the right amount? I want her to get back to work because I know it makes her feel amazing. I feel alive, and I've, you know, but. And I, you know, I'm on my journey, I'm doing my thing, and I'm super busy, and it's so exciting, and it's tough sometimes. I think you know, you'll know, like, I almost want to say, oh, I've got to go in, I've got all this exciting stuff going on, but then there's a sense of, am I just rubbing it in her face? Do you know what I mean? And it's tough. It's
100%. I think I've experienced that when coming home, you want to, previously they're your biggest supporters, your partners.
Yeah.
And then when you've had a child, or in my case two, they now, when you're coming home to explain X, Y, Z, or for me even coming downstairs to explain, oh, just spoke about this, just spoke to someone about this. Yeah. And previously they're your biggest, you know, advocate and cheering you on, let's go, yeah, that's amazing. Also very interested in it and adding their own value to it.
Yeah.
But then when there's a baby or another baby screaming for the whole morning and then you come down and you're trying to talk about this, it can feel like you're rubbing it in their faces, or that it's just not appropriate or the most important thing anymore. Do you think since having a kid it's changed your perspective on business and the value you place on validation and what we expect as success from what we're influenced by?
I think the first thing, sort of going through the process of becoming a father, sort of as he's growing inside the belly, I found it super motivating. And then since his arrival, I've been far more intentional with my time. Whereas before, I maybe didn't mind sort of going, you know, to different events or spending 2 hours on a call that I could have done in an hour. Or do you know what I mean? Like, I've kind of become a lot more strict on that sense, which I think is actually a real positive step for the business as well, not just for my family, but, you know, for my own personal time. Like, I think that really helped. Explain your question again.
You know, your perception of business previous to this, you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, you've had success, you've raised money for other businesses. And then when you have a child, for me, it changed my perspective on what I valued the most in my life. Yeah. Before that, it was literally my business is number one priority. It's our number one priority. All my time, all my spare time, my passion, everything's going to this. I'll come to the office at 8 a.m. I'll leave at 8 p.m. happy as Larry to sacrifice anything else that would come in the way of that. But then once you have a child, for me, it changed my perspective on the value I had, because I'd never felt the joy and the fulfillment. And I also have never felt such love for something in my life past my business, because of what my business has allowed me to have. So I'm interested on your perspective on that, because that used to be my number one.
This, if I'm honest with you, I don't know the answer yet. I don't quite know the answer, and it's something I'm actually working through, because Positive Plus One has been and still is my baby. You know, and like any sort of, you know, there's times, like any baby, there's times when the baby's calm and it doesn't need your undivided attention, but there is times when Positive Plus One is screaming and it needs me, and I still see it as my baby. And now I've got 2 babies, and it's really tough. I don't think, you know, I love Positive Plus One because it's so much bigger than me, and it positively affects thousands, you know, potentially millions of people in the world, and I carry that, do you know what I mean, that weight on my shoulders. If I don't turn up, that baby's screaming, and these people are starting to rely upon this platform. So I really struggle with that, because I do want to be the best father, and I feel the most loved, like when I'm spending time with them, and those giggles, and like they are worth more than anything in the world. But like you said, I'm at a stage right now where, you know, acceleration and I need to be super present. And I love what I do. Like I love what I do, you know, day in, day out. I can't remember the last time I woke up, even when things are really tough, that I think, God, I don't want to do this work today. Like, what a great place to be. That is so, I don't know. I'm figuring it out. That's the truth. I'm figuring it out. I'm still finding that balance. It's my son Riley's been born. You know, he's been alive in the world for 4.5 months. Like, I'm still finding that balance. Finding like that. What's the right ratio? Is it can the two coexist? Kind of thing as my number one priority. I think that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. Is that possible? And then at times one's screaming, it needs a little bit more attention, but they're kind of still, you know,
balancing that equation.
Yeah.
What was your upbringing like then? So did you come from money? Did you come from entrepreneurship?
No, not
You're rich, Tosser.
No. I listen. I live in a really nice place now. I live in Harrogate, which is super nice. But I started out in a place called Harrells. If you want to Google that, feel free. But the way I describe it to people is, if Leeds had an arsehole, that's where it is. Harrells is rough. You know, Harrells is a rough place, and you know, and then I moved around a lot as a kid, and different schools, and you know, my mum, I don't know, I was exposed to a lot as a kid that the kid shouldn't be exposed to. And
talking about abuse, are you talking about?
Yeah,
just...
so
don't have to talk about it.
Yeah, well, I tell you, you can cut it out. But I was beat up as a kid.
Right. By your parents?
My brother's dad, my stepdad. So my mum and dad were 2021 when they had me. Then they separated. You know, I'm a 2-year-old kid, and then she met my brother's dad. And when I was about 10, 11 years old, one night driving back, me and my brother were play fighting back at the car. He just kicked the fuck out of me. We got moved to safe houses, and then oh yeah, we're wild.
So there was intervention.
Yeah. So like I he would.
How was that reported?
Social services.
Who called them?
Well, we were in the car, and he beat my mum up a bit as well during it, and she got out of the car and ran off. And I remember going upstairs into the house, and I'd like pissed my pants, and I could feel like my face were like swollen. I'd never felt. I was like, what the fuck is this? And I looked
throbbing.
Like, yeah, and I looked like Elephant Man and I was like, I remember looking at myself in the mirror and being like, what is this? And that changed the trajectory of my life forever.
Yeah.
Big time. And we moved around a lot, and we moved to social housing and then council estates, and you know, they're not the best places, council estates, just the fact. But
yeah.
It moulded me, it shaped me. So I didn't come from money. I didn't come from a well-educated background. I didn't come from any of that. I struggled at school. I struggled with even connecting with people. I struggled. And I lived miles away, 28 miles away from school. So I had to get 4 buses a day. Like, it was tough.
Wow.
Because I'd developed a bad reputation at school for being a kid who couldn't control his own emotions and stuff. And, you know, then trying to get into better schools, they were like, no way. So yeah, it were tough. But my mum, you know, my parents, even now, have a great work ethic. They work hard, and I'd adopted that. But because I didn't have sort of, you know, constant father figures, I surrounded myself with, and I sort of attached myself to people, and they just so happened to be entrepreneurs. They just so happened to be business owners. Look, first guy, Bernie, that's my man. He owned the local pizza shop, and I just begged him for a job at 13, and I was like his front of house guy, and like taught me about speaking to customers, and then like managing the cash and stuff, and the responsibility of sort of running the restaurant and stuff like that. So I learned a lot that way. And I remember finishing school, thank God, and my dad being like, "What are you gonna do?" And I was like, he said, "You know, you should be a trader, be an electrician, they earn really good money." And I was like, "I ain't gonna be a trader." And he was like, "What do you want to? What are you gonna do then?" I went, "I'm gonna be a businessman." And he laughed. And he was like, "What business?" And I'm like, "I don't know yet. I ain't got a clue. I don't know yet."
What would have been his response been back then if you said, "I'm gonna start an app for people with HIV"?
Probably the same response that I got, you know, when I first started it like seven years ago, which is, "What the fuck do you know about HIV? What do you know about building apps?" And the truth was, I didn't know anything. But, you know, my friends, my family, like, they were like, "What are you on about?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Yeah, this is what you're gonna do?"
Yeah.
You know, one of my friends had been diagnosed with HIV. I wanted to help. That's the be all and end all of it.
In the beginning then, so when you're going through all of that abuse, right, and that uncertainty, getting moved around, what do you feel like now is the advice or the kind of support that you had from somebody? You know, you mentioned you didn't have that stable father figure in your life. If you did have that father figure, what would he have said to you at that time to make sure you got what you needed, and what was the support you needed verbally back then?
You know, I've thought about this a lot, and I think that we're very, especially sort of within the education system, we're very put into a box, and if you don't quite fit inside that box, you're made to feel like you're an idiot, or like, I don't know, like you don't kind of fit within society. And school's a tough place, right? Like, we all know this. School's is tough. It's brutal at times. And just somebody to just kind of say to me, like, it's all right to be a bit different. It's okay to not fit the mold that society tells you to be. You know, to say that it's all right to fail. You know, to get stuff wrong. I feel like that is such an important thing, where society punishes us for getting stuff wrong, for saying the wrong thing, for acting the wrong way. Like, you're in a constant learning cycle. How are you meant to know until you fuck up? And I just needed somebody to say, it's all right, you know, like, help me not ricochet off the barriers so much, kind of thing. You know, and it helped me find my own feet. Do you know what I mean? I think that's what I need, and that's certainly what I'm going to give to my son.
Speaking on that, do you feel like, because you've suffered the way you have, which is trauma, if you really want to just put it in a box, you know, you've been traumatized and had some traumatizing experiences that you've survived. How does that affect your own relationship and your own behavior when raising your own son? Because often traumatized people traumatize people.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's true. Yeah.
You know, you having that treatment and receiving that makes you actually statistically more likely to kick the shit out of your own son.
Yeah. I think it's something I've really addressed, and even during the pregnancy and stuff, like, you know, you really question what kind of a parent you want to be, and statistically you are right. People who were traumatized and abused and all that tend to do the same things, relive the same experiences, and it's a vicious cycle. And I make a conscious effort, and sometimes that's really difficult, especially when you're so busy with your business and you know, and building a team and whatever else, and trying to, you know, divide yourself up proportionally. I have to make a conscious effort to think, right, I needed more as a kid. I needed a bit more attention. And trying to just allocate, you know, that time. And that sounds ridiculous. I have to allocate time for my family, but it's true. Like, you know, I have to make that conscious effort, and I do that. And then, you know, I reflect as well. You know, there's times when like, God, your baby just don't want to stop crying, and you just want to shake them, like just stop, and you want to shout.
You ever told your baby to shut up?
Yeah. Yeah, I have. Yeah.
So have I.
Yeah, I have.
I've whispered it. Shut up.
It's like, but then, in the same breath, I reset.
Yeah.
And I'll like, right, there's a better way. And I'll put him on my knees and I'll face him and I'll talk to him like as a fully grown human. And I'm like, I'm struggling. I just need 30 seconds. I'm like, just give me a smile. And like anything that, right, yeah. And he like, as I change and I settle, he changes. And it's just.
I feel like kids are a really big mirror and reflection of your best and worst.
Yeah.
And they are sponges. Obviously, your son is 4.5 months, you said. Mine's coming up to 2 years old now. And this guy, right, we treat him with the respect we would treat an adult.
Good.
Which, as I was growing up, wasn't the way things were done. You're a kid. You're a kid, so you shouldn't know X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Don't ask about X, Y, Z. This is your limit of childhood knowledge that you're allowed to understand. Not for the whole part, but for most part. And we don't do that. We treat our son with the respect that he's an adult, and that if he can progress quicker than his age requires him to, why wouldn't we do that?
Yeah, true.
And one thing that we've noticed a lot is how much he mirrors who we are and what we do, which makes us super conscious of how we are around him.
Yeah.
With slip-ups, of course. You know, you might say the odd swear word in front of him, and he'll repeat it, or sounds like he'll try and repeat it, but it won't sound the same. And I feel like that's something that, again, changes you as a person. It makes you more efficient and effective and conscious.
I think it makes you self-reflect a lot more.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it makes you self-reflect a lot more. What kind of father do I want to be?
Do you feel like you're getting the chance to re-father yourself through your son?
Yeah, I do, yeah, I do. I think that's a great way of putting it.
My therapist said that to me.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I stole that one.
Yeah.
That is a really good way of putting it.
Yeah, it is, yeah. I really do. And in a selfish sense, I want to make myself proud by saying like I actually managed it. I overcame it. I didn't fall within the statistics. I'm an anomaly.
What would you say to people who are like experiencing trauma right now, that don't have the help they need, that aren't necessarily forthcoming, that are suffering out there?
Take a step back. Stop punishing yourself. Be a little bit more acceptance that, you know, it's not all your fault, but it is your responsibility and yours alone to get on top of it. And you have the power to do that, whether you believe it or not at the right moment in time. You have to fill your head with that positive thought and repeat, like, I can overcome this. And look, you know, reach out. Like, there's therapy everywhere, and you can find it for free if you really look, if you're really interested. But, you know, the easy thing to do is to just let it consume you. Like, be beaten up. That's the easy thing to do. Fight back. Like, find the ability to stand back on your own 2 feet and go and actively seek the help. Right, yeah. But like I said, it falls on your shoulders, and you've got to fight. You've got to find that fight. Yeah,
I feel like it requires a lot of courage as well.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I agree.
You know, if your caregivers are the ones who are impacting you negatively like that, it takes a lot of courage to actually come out and say you're willing to sacrifice, because it's not going to be all trauma in most cases. It's security, house, food, travel. You know, these people are sustaining your life as a young person, especially. And then the great unknown is, what if all of that's removed? Is it not worth just sustaining the abuse so I can keep going? And that's the kind of thing that I've noticed.
Yeah, it's that vicious cycle, isn't it?
Yeah. All right, with positive +1 HIV people, a lot of people don't come forward. You've mentioned.
Yeah.
What are the main reasons people don't come forward when they've got HIV?
Do you want to know the really sad truth? Within the community, the rule tends to be it's best not to tell anyone because you can't untell them.
Wow.
And if you think about that, that's so sad, because they live, for the most part, in fear of being rejected, fear of being blackmailed in some cases. Fear of
Blackmailed how?
I've been told stories multiple times where a member of your family or ex-partner or someone might think, oh, maybe they have, and they'll kind of hunt you, and then they'll blackmail you against you, outing you against your own family. Gareth Thomas, the Welsh...
So if you don't pay us, we're going to tell everyone you've got HIV?
Yeah.
What?
And that happens a lot more than it ever should. And, you know, Gareth Thomas, the Welsh international rugby star, British Lions, he was blackmailed by journalists, and that's why he had to come out about his HIV status. That's how that happened.
What if you don't pay the journalists, we're going to air a story about it?
Yeah. And he had to take that decision was forced for him, and that happens a lot.
Wow.
For people in this community. So, like I said, it's best not to tell anyone because they can't untell someone. What a sad thing that is. And the truth is, that's because of stigma. It's because of the miseducation or the lack of education. HIV has changed. You know, you can live a normal, full, healthy life. You can, if you take your medication right, you can't pass it on anymore. And there's just so many new revelations and things and facts about HIV. It's changed, you know.
So it's no longer the story that mass media kind of retells, which is, you know, Magic Johnson, he's lived a fairly normal life with HIV for a long time. Eazy-E, the rapper who died from it, who was apparently injected with it by Suge Knight, because of disputes with their record agreement. Those are really the only cases that I've ever heard of and the exposure I've had. And that means that when it comes to the ignorance and naivety of someone like myself and the rest of the public when it comes to HIV, it's enlightening. Because you're right, if somebody was to turn around and say, well, this is something that I mentioned to you would be a great test. If you start approaching people with the mic in the street and you say, hey, just so you're aware, after having a 1 minute conversation, I've got HIV, what do you think the response would be to that from the general public?
The sad thing is that I think most people would take a step back. I think that's the truth. You know, not everyone, but I think depending on where you are as well in the world, but I think a lot of people would take a step back, which is ridiculous.
And what you're saying is they don't need to do that anymore?
Well, no, I mean, you know, it's a blood-borne pathogen for starters. It's from blood mixing, right? That's how you contract. It's actually really difficult to acquire HIV, believe it or not. But, you know, it's not an airborne pathogen. Like, you know, somebody's not going to breathe on you. You're going to acquire HIV. Like, it's bollocks. Shaking hands, hugging, like, it's not going to happen. Yeah. You know, but and then the Tombstone advert, you know, back in the 80s, petrified the life out of everyone. It made people think, I don't want to go anywhere near that person because I'm just going to die. Yeah,
there's a story about Magic Johnson and players refusing, after he came out with HIV, to play against him in case of contracting HIV from playing against him if he, you know, had an open cut, if their blood mixed somehow. And that was, again, the mass story that, you know, players are protesting against playing against someone with HIV. But in the reality, players could have HIV and they haven't come forward with it.
Not even that, but players can have HIV and not even realise that they've got HIV. Like, you tend to acquire HIV through having sex. Fucking everyone has sex. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, most people have sex. It's just one of those things, you know. In the US, 13 to 18% are estimated to be people living with HIV don't even realise, 13 to 80% of the community don't realise that they've got HIV. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's spread a lot through that. They continue to have sex with different partners and it's spreading. So there's the whole thing around opt out HIV testing. If you go to a sexual health clinic right now, in most parts of the world, they will ask you it's an opt-in basis. Do you want the HIV test?
Do you want to know?
Yeah. So naturally they'll test you for everything else, chlamydia, gonorrhea, whatever it might be. But then for HIV, it's an extra. Oh, do you want to do that? Well, why is it just not the norm? And it's recently been done, and it's been piloted around the country now in the UK about opt-out testing. So they're just going to do it automatically. Guess what? They've found hundreds of new people living with HIV that have fallen under the radar. They've now got them on access to care, which means that they're receiving treatment, which means they're suppressing the virus, which means that they can continue having sex as normal, but not pass it on anymore.
Yeah.
So that's such a really simple solution to slow down the growth.
Yeah.
There's 1.7 to 1.8 million people a year newly diagnosed with HIV. That needs to slow down. It needs to slow down. So that's a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. For
Do you
sure.
know what I mean?
I think that, you know, the courage that you have to take on such a mission with people who are massively affected by this, you know, upwards of tens of millions of people around the world, all of these new cases, people not knowing that they've got HIV. I salute it big time, because there's a huge social aspect of this for-profit venture, if we're going to categorize it.
Yeah.
But it's a hell of a lot to take on, because it's such an emotional subject, and you're talking about helping people not just improve their lives, but also come forwards and live their true life with HIV, and removing the stigma around HIV, which I think is such a really commendable thing.
Thank you. Like, a really key thing for me is, like, I've created an environment where a person living with HIV can find a like-minded person who shares a similar story, and by finding that plus one, by finding that person to talk with, it empowers them to get back out into the real world and not live a life as a recluse in isolation, to live a proper, full, healthy life. You know what I mean? The strength in numbers kind of thing. Like, you're not alone in this journey. Like, there's 40 million people with HIV. Like, if I can bring them all together, how empowering is that? You know?
And it's not just about romantic relationships, is it?
No, of course not. No, people need connection of all kinds. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need connection, right? We need roofs over our heads, but we need...
So you did pay attention to some education.
Some. Yeah, well,
Your business BTEC came into play.
Yeah, I've taught myself more since I left school, believe it or not. You know, but like, then this is the focus group. This is what came out of the focus group that we did. We launched a dating platform, and I thought, because my friend who was diagnosed with HIV, he was like 26 years old. How do I tell someone? How do I meet someone? I want a romantic partner. That's kind of sent me down the path of dating and stuff. And then we focus groups, and we realised people need to make friends.
Amazing.
People need to find a listening board, a community where they can talk and not be judged, not feel like they can't speak openly. And that's all I'm doing. I'm not reinventing the wheel. Like, I'm just giving them a place to be able to do so.
Final question. What would the advice be that you'd give yourself in the very first business, the first 365 days of that business? What advice did you need, or would you give yourself that you needed back then to keep you going and to keep you achieving?
Get the finances right. Do your cash flow projections right. Don't make assumptions. You have to be as granular as you possibly can. I didn't have any financial literacy. I've taught myself a lot. You know, go sit down with your accountant, or find an accountant to sit down with and go through it. And, you know, you have to account for real world things, you know, volatility. You've got to give yourself a contingency, a buffer. My intention when I first raised some money was, I only need 20 grand. I'll launch this shop, and I did. But then I didn't account for, it takes 6 months to start making money. So I had to borrow more and borrow more. And then I was like, I didn't know about that. So that would have made my life a lot easier. I'd have probably got to cash flow quicker if I'd have just raised a little bit more to account for that first 6 months, that first 12 months of difficult, you know, cash flow. That was number one. The plan can change, you know, be prepared to you know, for it, plan A to not work out. Plan B, C might be a better option, but the money, the money makes.
Master your money.
Master your money. Like, master your money.
Amazing. Christian, thank you, brother. I appreciate you sharing all of this.
Thank you.
Very excited to see where Positive Plus One goes. more excited to see you develop this amazing human being that you've created and support your partner as well and continue to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Cheers.